This episode was created with the support of Free FM, Hamilton, New Zealand's community access media organisation. Visit us at freefm.org.nz.
Hello and welcome to another episode of ReThinking Mental Wellbeing. This is our community podcast where we can talk about everything related to depression and anxiety. So my name is Andre and I want to thank you for being with me over the next half an hour as we share the space of lived experience where we can talk about how to live the best version of our authentic life. So, if you're ready, then I'm ready. Welcome to the podcast. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode. Look, if you're joining me for the first time, I'd love to welcome you to the space. If you are back again, then welcome back to the space. So I opened up my emails last week and got this really good email in relation to a question that I thought we would spend this week in discussing. It's a great question, probably relatable to almost everybody. And it reads like this. Hi, Andre. Really enjoyed the session on stress, particularly from an anxiety point of view. You mentioned about changing your environment, and look, I'm wondering if you're able to provide some ideas about how to change your environment in a busy, pressure-filled and demanding life. I find my environment very overwhelming all the time. I have a busy job, I have a big family, lots of pressures and lots of stresses in all areas of life. And all I want to do is rest. It just doesn't seem like I'm able to give myself that time to rest and unwind. So I'd love some ideas around how to do this. Much appreciated. Anonymous. So as I said, this is a really good question. And so this week, I thought we would explore some options around how we can adjust our environment and create spaces through the day that we are able to get out of the chaos just for a little bit, to create environments of peace and calm. So we find in society that doing nothing is often seen as unproductive. Like, how many times have you been asked, hey, what have you been doing today? And if the response is, nothing, or not much, then it kind of feels like we have done something wrong, because we feel that we should be saying something else that shows us as being more productive and therefore more useful. So it's hard work to train ourselves to be okay with resting because of this idea that rest means we are not pulling our weight or not doing our fair share. We all live in a performance-based society. Some people would even say it's performance-obsessed. We ask questions that measure our status and our identity, like, how successful are you with work? How successful are you within society? How successful are you even within a family? And we celebrate successes by rewarding people who perform well. Things like praise, and awards, accolades, even an elevation in status. Some people's performance becomes a strong part of their identity, and it affects how other people see them and how they see themselves by how they fit into society. So I think we need to understand that, first of all, performance is key for our progression as a society, but not in all cases. First, the way we compare ourselves in relation to performance expectations in society has gone astray. What does this mean? As a human being, contrary to belief, it is normal to compare yourself to other people. And there's a reason for that. There's a purpose. And to know that purpose, we're going to go back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors' way of life. To look at life the way they did it. So back in those days, we lived in small tribes of between 80 to 150 people. Within those tribes, there was safety, there was security, there was connection, there was bonding. You felt like you had a place, a purpose in your position within that tribe. And in order to understand where you fit within that tribe, and for the greater good of the group, you needed to see how you were doing. So the question of how am I doing within this tribe, within this group of people, needed to be asked. These days, comparison tells us a little bit of a different story. The problem we have is not that we compare ourselves to other people. It is how we are comparing ourselves to other people that's the issue. Because these days, and for many people, we don't necessarily compare ourselves to see how we're doing. We compare ourselves to see what we're worth and if we're fitting in. And one of the biggest reasons why this happens is because we are one big tribe, thanks to 24/7 connectivity and social media. You literally have the world at your fingertips. And you have 9 billion versions all telling you 9 billion different ways on how to be successful, how to be productive, how to be accepted, how to be good, or even how to be worth something. We are continually bombarded every day from people telling us that you need this car, you need this house, you need this type of job, you need this social group, you need to look like this, sound like this, you need to be like this, you need to have the latest potato peeler. That will change your life, because without it, life's going to be harder, it's going to be more difficult, and it will remind you, if you don't have it, that you are unhappy without it. You need this thing from Temu to make your happiness fit our definition of what happiness looks like for you. And so we have millions of interpretations by billions of people about what to think, what to look like, what to do, what to say, and what to be like that fits the acceptable standard and criteria of performing well. You just have to look at social media with people's highly edited, highly rehearsed, filtered-based, scripted versions of their performance, which we automatically will compare ourselves against our performances, if repeated often. And when we compare ourselves against other people, but we use our own insecurities to do that, we will always fall short. And when that occurs, now the ruler of comparison deceives you, because it is measuring the rating of what you believe you are worth against the constant reminder of the ever-changing criterias and platforms telling you that you are not enough, that you are not good enough, that you are not worth enough as you are, and that you're not productive enough. This is why it's important to understand that we are not creating spaces for nothing, but we are creating spaces of purposeful and intentional rest for recovery, to stop, to slow down for the purpose of maintaining our health and well-being by learning to listen to what our biology is telling us to do. So resting is not just something nice to do. It is a critical part of growth. Resting also helps with things like reducing inflammation to support a healthy immune system. It helps manage stress levels and lowers blood pressure, and it contributes to a healthier heart. The ability to rest enhances our focus and our concentration and our cognitive and our brain function. Resting also promotes things like stress reduction, anxiety management, mood regulation, and many, many more things. The impact of rest on mental and emotional well-being should not be underestimated. So why do we find it hard to rest? As we mentioned before, one potential reason is that you may have a misplaced sense of self-worth. Another reason is that you may be easily distracted by the wrong things for the wrong reasons. So just a side note on distractions. Distractions are useful and a useful part in our well-being journey. Distractions are useful, important, and even necessary. The purpose of distractions is to give yourself a break, to get out of your head, to be able to give yourself that space for a moment. But distractions become unhelpful when the activity that you are using as a distraction becomes less rewarding and less fulfilling, but still making those distractions your main feature in life for the purpose of never having to address the deeper stuff. There's this beautiful quote that says, "We do what we do at any given time because it is the most compelling thing to do." So if the most compelling thing to do is to avoid the gaps and the spaces that rest provides because the echoes of our feelings and emotions and thoughts become too loud in that space of rest, now it becomes like an echo chamber. So distraction fills in the gaps that silences the noise that we're trying to avoid. There's another saying that says emotions have claustrophobia. The more you bury them down, the more restless they become. But emotions have to be processed. They have a purpose. There's a reason why we have emotions, and we'll get into that maybe in the next episode. But if emotions are suppressed for a long period of time, they will be expressed in a different way, through a different form. So maybe we don't rest because we feel that we're letting people down if we rest. We may have been taught through life to put others first, to think of others before ourselves. But how many have misinterpreted that as saying that other people are more important than us? And so for many of us, the things we do for other people become our currency of approval, acceptance, and validation for a greater meaning and purpose in life. And so with the idea of rest, it could mean that we are not putting others first, and that may be foreign to us because rest would be seen as selfish or wrong, and therefore an attitude worthy to be condemned in the eyes of society. Maybe we don't find rest because we don't understand what healthy rest looks like. So according to mindfulhealthsolutions.com, which is a health service in the States, there are 7 types of rest. There's physical rest, mental rest, emotional rest, sensory rest, creative rest, social rest, and spiritual rest. And each type focuses on a different aspect of our life. And by understanding the different types, we can identify areas throughout our life where we need to focus on rest and prioritize our self-care accordingly. So maybe we don't rest because we have a constant need to be stimulated, because maybe we interpret low stimulation as boredom. There's a neuroscientist by the name of Andrew Huberman, has this fantastic podcast called the Huberman Lab Podcast, and he says that our need for pleasure without the prior requirements of pursuit is terrible for us. These days we have everything at our fingertips, but it often comes at the cost of being too easy, because there's little need to put effort into things. And when things are easy all the time, when we don't put in effort of pursuit and lean into the difficulty of things, we become dependent on taking the path of least resistance but maximum stimulation, the easy path to get what we're looking for. But what we find is not necessarily what we are wanting or even needing. We have a neurotransmitter called dopamine, and I'm not going to get into the neuroscience of dopamine too deeply, but I'm going to talk about it within this context of rest. Dopamine is known as our neurotransmitter of motivation, of craving, satisfaction, of pursuit and reward and movement. Dopamine loves reward, and it will seek it out, because us as human beings reflexively will move towards things that give us pleasure and move away from things that give us pain. Anna Lemke is another famous neuroscientist who's done some amazing work on dopamine and addiction, refers to our environment as the plenty paradox. In other words, in this day and age, we are overstimulated and overwhelmed way too often. We have so many what we call context switches at our fingertips. On average, you get about 10,000 context switches within 30 minutes on platforms like TikTok or other social media platforms, and it becomes very easy to saturate our dopamine circuitry. And so one way to replenish and reset our dopamine baseline back to normal and to get out of the stimulation is to rest. But this feels frustrating. This feels like boredom. This will feel like effort. So we can, for argument's sake, just call this withdrawal. But this means we are now out of balance, and we are not harmonized within the environment that is more beneficial to us. And so we need to create distance from the things that we find overwhelming because they're overstimulating, to find those spaces where we can stop chasing things and learn to readjust back to a place of balance and harmony. And in order to do this, we need to first develop what we call a curious mindset. So going back to this email for a bit, I really like the way that he wrote this from an inquisitive, curious point of view, and understanding that there were options that he wasn't able to see. So now I'm going to offer a different perspective through the asking of 2 questions. That is something that my teacher taught me many years ago. And this is a way to look through life through 2 specific lenses and 2 specific viewpoints to ask two questions. Question number one, is this situation or circumstance or environment or person healthy and helpful for me, or unhealthy and unhelpful for me? And in the second question, we need to ask, is this event, circumstance, person, environment, situation, draining or refueling? So let me put this into an example. I am an avid gym goer. I love going to the gym. Very good for my mental well-being and an integral part and essential part of my quality of life. Getting there, though, is a completely different story. It's extremely hard work. There are a million things that I could be doing that will be more compelling and more convincing than going to the gym, but not necessarily better. Have you ever noticed how easy things are when we're motivated to do things? But discipline and willpower is doing the best thing, the healthiest thing, the right thing, but not necessarily the easiest thing. So have you noticed that these two questions that I asked before are not about motivation? In other words, there's no question in there that asks, do you feel like doing it? And there's a reason for that. Because if you're anything like me with my life, with depression, anxiety, PTSD, there are going to be many more times that I'm not going to want to do things. And if I lived by that rule, wanting or not wanting to do things and being dictated only by my motivation, there's a quote that says, in the absence of motivation, discipline comes to life. And because there's nothing here about asking myself the question, do I want to do it? I have to do it. And this way of looking at things is a practice. It's a discipline that gets easier the more you practice. This takes practice because we've spent many years focusing on activities and productivity. But for those of us who live with anxiety or a lot of stress, we need to be really aware of the energy exchange between us and the outside world. So when I ask myself those two questions, is the gym healthy and helpful for me? Absolutely. Is it draining or refueling? Now, when I say draining and refueling, I'm talking about what it's like during, but more importantly, afterwards. And how do you feel after the event? It will always be refueling. So whether I want to go to the gym or not is now irrelevant, because my choice has been made for me because of the answer to those two questions. Another thing we need to look at when it comes to rest is how we get our energy and how we use our energy and how our environment is creating the different types of energy. This means understanding where you see yourself along a spectrum. This particular spectrum is seeing where you fit at any given time or any given day around where you prefer to get your energy from. It's how you prefer to be refueled, how you prefer to replenish your energy. Do you prefer either alone, in solitude, or with people? Do you get your refueling energy from solitude or people? The term they use for this along the spectrum is, are you more introverted or more extroverted? I'm going to talk about introvert-extrovert natures in future episodes. So we need to understand, first of all, that no one is 100% introverted or 100% extroverted. What does introvert and extrovert mean? It tells you where you prefer to get your energy from in any given day, in any given situation. That's how you prefer to replenish your energy, either on your own in solitude or with other people. Now, before I go on, some of you will be saying, I am a bit of both, which is normal. No one is 100% introvert or 100% extrovert, but you will lean into one more than the other. Unless, of course, you are ambivert, which is the best of both worlds, which we will talk about at later episodes. I am extremely introverted. That's important for me to know because I spent years living in an extroverted world and wondering why I was overwhelmed all the time. Now I adjust life around my times in solitude that I need in order to refuel my way. It's where I can get out of the external stimulation of the world around me, and as someone who lives with anxiety, I do get overwhelmed by my external environment very easy, and I need to adjust life so I can enjoy stillness and silence and peace, and reset within an atmosphere of calmness. So what does introvert refueling and extrovert refueling look like? This is where we start to understand we are building an introvert sanctuary or an extrovert sanctuary, because the focus of both of those is where you get your energy from. So if you like the idea of finding a quiet place, whether in nature or an environment that is peaceful around home, you could do things like watching a favorite TV show, or listening to music, or going to a cafe, or writing a notebook, or journaling. It could be planning a project or doing a project, could be listening to an audiobook, maybe even doing a crossword puzzle, could be even people watching at a cafe, could be going to a movie, could be going for a drive. All of those things. Could be having a coffee, could be doing a mindfulness practice, could be learning something new, could be reading. And if you listen to these ideas and you're drawn and compelled to any one of these, then that is your humanity or your biology telling you what you need to do. Ignoring these internal signals will be extremely draining and hard-working. What about the flip side? What if you crave connection? Because that is what you need at that time to rest and refuel. Then if you find yourself craving connection, but you are in solitude, and not allowing yourself to find connection, but staying in solitude, now you're isolating. And that is extremely draining, because you are denying yourself a basic human need of connection. The way I see this is imagining for a minute that there is a forest. And if you've ever seen a forest full of pine trees, you'll know that in between different sections, there's a space, there's a gap. And that gap in that space, or fire break, is designed that if there's a fire in one section, it stops. Then it won't spread to the next section because of that fire break. Our day needs to be just like that, having lots of emotional breaks or resting breaks, refueling time where you can dedicate your time and balance your exchange of energy in versus energy out. Now the question needs to be asked is, what type of activities can you do in order to feel rested or refueled? This depends on if you are an active relaxer or a passive relaxer. An active relaxer is someone that needs to be doing something in order to relax. Think of a wind turbine. It moves to generate energy, and it's the same with an active relaxer. So an example of an active relaxer would be walking in nature, Tai Chi, yoga. And again, you are the one that knows what you need to do by how your internal state feels. Sometimes you'll have more energy, but you want to relax. That's when you can go out and do something maybe a bit more physical. The other type of relaxing is called passive relaxing. Passive relaxing means that you do activities that require very little effort or even very little engagement. So things like listening to music, showering, being outdoors, reading, meditation, mindfulness, even deep breathing exercises are all examples of passive activities. It's important to know that just because you do an activity, it doesn't mean that it's going to rest you, because the activity itself does not automatically mean you're going to feel rested afterwards. What may work for one person may not work for you. This is very internally measured and subjective by what you feel you need. But if you have a whole lot of options where that you can provide yourself choices, you'll be in a better place than if you had no choices. So we've talked about three things so far. First of all, we talked about asking the questions of, is this healthy or helpful or draining or refueling? And the second thing we looked at is asking ourselves, what is the atmosphere that we need to rest in? Whether we need alone time or solitude time or connection time being around people. And the third is understanding what type of relaxing do you need. Do you prefer active relaxing or do you prefer passive relaxing? And finding out the options of where you fit with these will depend entirely on the day and how you feel internally. So now's a good time to mention that with everything that we've talked about, we also need to give ourselves space and room to place these things in our day and in our week. In other words, you have to give yourself permission to give yourself these refueling and resting spaces. The permission that we give ourselves is us saying, I'm allowed to. I'm allowed to put myself first before others. I'm allowed to look after my needs. I'm allowed to stop and rest. I'm allowed to be kind to myself. And the best way to start is to start small. Start with 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. It doesn't matter, but the key is to do something that starts to create a consistent routine. as we teach ourselves to construct resting and refueling moments throughout our day, and to learn through our practice that resting and refueling is as important as the breath that we take. Changing the focus from resting when it's forced on us to we can choose to rest because it's the decision that we've made for ourselves. And so it's about changing our focus from resting as an option to resting as compulsory and an essential part of our well-being to learn to live authentically. It's about creating space with permission, continuously showing up, and it's about listening to what you need to do with kindness and compassion that you show yourself. So that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you've got something useful from this discussion. And if you have any questions you would like us to discuss on future episodes, then please email me at rethinkingmentalwellbeing@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. So until then, go well, go in peace, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
This Free FM podcast was brought to you with support from New Zealand On Air.